In this tutorial, I'll show you how I approach phasing and how I apply its core principles in a creative way. In the first part, my mic is low a bit because I haven't positioned it properly, so sorry about that. So here I have two drum loops. So the first one, the dry one, sounds like this. It was just a quick thing that I made in FL. Okay. And with, I guess with the technique or with just processing, it sounds like this. Okay. The thought process with the first one, with the drum loop, the reason why it's grouped like this and that it has these sends, I'll get back to it later, but for now they are all disabled. The processing that I did to it, so that, again, the same drum loop. All of this is just me trying to give it tone. So for the purpose of this tutorial, it's irrelevant. And so what I did, this is just EQing, 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 and this is pulling up some of the stuff. It's like a compressor. Okay. This as well, this is a topic for a different day. But what I did here was I tried to get some tonal variation with the sample and just variation in general. What I did then was I rendered out, I got this loop out of this and I just resampled it. And so this loop sounds like this. Very similar to the original one. The difference is almost, you can't even tell it. But where the difference comes in is because I changed the first sample slightly and I gave it variation and I rendered it out, when you play the samples together, they will, and as I inverted the phase here, and you do it by doing this, or you have a preset here where phase invert, it's just the same thing. And so, and when you play them back together, you get this. Okay. So you get that flanger phase sound, or the difference between the two samples are playing together at the same time. And this is quite a powerful tool and a powerful thing to use, as you can get variation and make stuff interesting, and you can further that. Next, I grouped these two and I took the original drum sample, the original loop. I selected it and I used the pre-FX, so the untreated version of it, so it will use the drum loop without everything here. I used this here. Okay, so I used this. This is just a fancy reverb. I used the preset, which sounded good, and I just dialed down the later reflections, so it will just leave me more of the early ones in the room tone. So again, I'm coloring the sound without it being overly colored, and with it sounds like this. So this is the original sample from this one, but colored like this. Difference. So the difference without it, with it. Again, it's the same deal, but it's as if, I mean, this is literally it. This is just a speaker that's playing it to a room, to microphones. The same sample colored differently, and I'm adding it in with the two fade samples that I got here before, and so together they sound like this. So without it. So this sounds too thin. This is almost my original sample. And so together they sound like this. Okay. Then I grouped them together and I used this. This is also like a tone thing. This is, I guess, just to glue the entire deal together and give it, this gives it more papery feel, like a top presence. But again, this isn't mandatory. Okay. So with the second example, it may be more apparent on how you can use this technique, as this was a more of a coloring thing to the deal. So with this here, I took a drum break, which on its own sounds like this. Okay. I took the drum break and I processed it 3 different times, distorting it. Okay, this is detuning it, giving it chorus, whatever. Here, right, unison as well. The second one, okay, I'm pushing it to the pedal, but difference here being it's put to fuzz rather to distort, and I messed around with my pre-gain here to give it a different tone to it as well. The third one is, so it's a filter version of the first one as well, and the delay here is offsetting it. Okay, and so when you play the 3 together, and mind you, I inverted the phase here, but when you play them together, so I'll add, when I play them together, I'll add them up just so you can try and get a feel and hear what's happening with it. The middle one is the one that sounds similar to the dry one the most. So, okay, I'll add in the delayed one. So if the phase wasn't inverted, and so here I'm adding in okay, and so the 3 together, they sound like this. There's no processing on them as a group. This is for organizing sake. And so here's where it becomes interesting. I did the same thing as with the first example. I created a new audio track and I took one of these. It doesn't matter because it's the same sample, and I took it, put it to pre-effects, so it's unaffected by anything here. And so what I did here is I flipped the phase, but I used the auto pan. And so what the auto pan is doing is offsetting stuff, and you'll hear it right now as it makes it more interesting. So it becomes more apparent, and so you can hear it when I turn off the phase flipping utility. You can hear the sample being more apparent, and that's because you are getting more of the original sample and you're getting more gain. But with the third one, I guess it's where it got the most interesting, as I took the auto pan, but I took the shredder preset, and I did the same thing as with this audio track, and I flipped the phase, and right, so right now you're hearing the original sample, but you're hearing it more as movement, and you're hearing it move around, panning, but as well as like it's way more dynamic, and it's you're almost as if you're hearing this here, right? And with it, you can get very creative with it. So like here you're distorting it without distortion, and you're not getting crazy levels nor anything, right? And you can go to, to infinity with this. You can add in more stuff and just add in almost like ghosts to the sample and movement. That's I guess you would say like you would add a negative space to it. To sum up the tutorial, inverting phase and adding in signals, I wouldn't say properly, but being mindful of these things can go a long way. I'll do more of these. This was a test video, and thank you for watching.